A lot of youth health strategies are based on data and statistics, and most of the time it is just adult experts that are creating these plans and programs with limited input from the youth. And young people both create and consume digital media, which paves the way for powerful learning experiences both in and outside the classroom. They are no longer passive consumers, but are and should be in the driving seat, influencing strategies and program design. And today we'll be asking our youth panelists to share with us their experiences and their opinions about the state of youth health. So, I'd like to welcome everyone to the panel, and to start with, I would love to have everyone go down the line and introduce and maybe talk about one or two health topics that you're personally passionate about. Maybe starting on that side with Sean.
Hi friends, I'm Sean Riley. I use they, them, their pronouns, or he, him, his pronouns. And the health issues that I'm most passionate about, I'm passionate about all health issues, but things that I'm super interested in is using the arts to look at trauma and our mental health states, because it's proven that the arts help engage different parts of our minds that we don't get to engage every single day. So that, as well as LGBT issues and accessible healthcare for folks with, who are differently abled or neurodivergent or have disabilities.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Sis. I use they, them, their pronouns. Two of the issues that come to mind for me in particular are around HIV and AIDS education and awareness, also just accessibility to treatment and to testing around HIV and AIDS, and also the second issue is around mental health, particularly in regards to stigma and discrimination, and also for young people as well.
Hey y'all. I'm Donia, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm most passionate, I think, about sexual and reproductive health issues, but also civic engagement and making sure that young people have a seat at the table for these issues around, abortion and sex education, because that's impacted my life personally, and so I'm really passionate about encouraging young people to have that seat at the table so they can fight for their own rights.
Hey everyone, my name is Max Kamen-Cross. I use he and him pronouns. I've always been really passionate about preventative healthcare, especially in low-income or rural communities, just given how much money and time we can save by dealing with a lot of these healthcare issues before they occur, whether that's through education or, like Donia mentioned, preventive sex ed education. That's really important to me.
Hello again. My name is Maluba. I use she or her pronouns, and I'm really passionate about why I was born HIV positive, so HIV health, and I think incorporating that into the state of mental health of young people, because I think that the biggest challenge and battles that I grew up with was also like stigmatizing myself, so I'm huge on that, and yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Janaea Green. One thing that I'm very passionate about is making healthcare available for people from all different economic classes. I don't think it should just be afforded to people who are from higher classes.
Hi, my name is Brooke Roberts. I'm an 8th grade math teacher. Two topics that I'm passionate about are women who've been domestically abused and young girls who suffer from self-esteem.
Hi everyone, my name is Monique Nguyen, and I'm currently a healthcare analyst, and I'm very interested in how we can improve access to quality healthcare, as well as improving utilization and how we can focus on prevention, especially for marginalized and unhoused individuals.
Hi everyone, I'm VNA. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really passionate about mental health and youth peer education, especially with sexual and reproductive health.
Great. Okay, so now that we know everybody, let's start off by talking about what do you guys think are the top of mind health issues among your peer group, and why? If anyone has any thoughts on that.
I'll start. I feel teen pregnancy is one of the top reasons, And the reason why I say that is because some girls do not have outlets or feel as though they are not worth more than reproducing, or they don't have anyone, a role model that tells them that they can be more, they can do more than just being at home, cooking, raising kids. So I definitely feel that teen pregnancy is one of the top health issues.
One top health issue I think is very important right now is mental health. As a college student, I'm meeting more and more people who are dealing with like anxiety and things like that, and a lot of my peers say it's getting worse because of college and because of studies and all the different pressures that come with growing up. And I think in a lot of different environments, mental health isn't often talked about, so it's kind of left to the wayside, and it's really affecting different people.
I think one issue that comes to mind when I think about my peer group is just in regards to HIV and AIDS prevention, right, in PrEP, and just getting the access to the information around what is PrEP, how to use PrEP, and kind of following up with treatment appointments and things like that. I think there's a lot of confusion for young people in particular, and also the question really whether or not should somebody use PrEP, should somebody not use PrEP, and I think also the dialogues around PrEP use can sometimes be very discriminatory and very stigmatizing, right? I won't mention some of the names that are out there around PrEP users, but I think within the community there's just a lot of confusion about how to use PrEP, how to get access to PrEP, and I think there just needs to be a larger conversation around that for young people.
So I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I moved there from the north. And I think one of the largest things that I've seen since moving there is like this lack of A, sex education, B, real conversations about mental health, especially for folks who hold historically marginalized identities, right? So people who are trans, people who are people of color, working class folks are the people that statistically experience mental health issues on a much more large scale, yet our mental health services are tailored to the white upper class men in our society, right? So making sure that for my peers, especially my queer friends and folks of color, making sure that access is tailored to them as well is a huge issue that I see both in the north and the south, but the huge conversations that need to be begun and continued in the South is a huge thing.
I'm going to break the rules. I'm not supposed to answer this question because I'm not listed for it, but
break them.
Breaking them. I'm going to say access to abortion. I think that if anything's been highlighted this past year, the attacks on Planned Parenthood, that's not an attack on an institution, that's an attack on women. That's just been built up and institutionalized in our country and our world over time. And it's just now coming to fruition. You know, like when we talk about Donald Trump, like his bigotry is not something new. That's like existed since the founding of this country. So, yeah, I'm gonna put that out there, like access to abortion and like women's right to choose, you know, what's going on, like within their own body and their own access, you know, like I get to choose, you know, what happens to my uterus, not a male lawmaker, and, you know, a male, white, straight lawmaker.
Yeah. So it seems like some of the big ones in our youth peer group are mental health and sexuality, the lack of conversation or the lack of openness to that. Why do we think this is so important for youth today? What makes it different than the older demographics? Why is it important for us to talk about within schools or not?
I think one of the reasons why it's been such a more prevalent issue today, as well more than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, is really due to social media and the internet, where we can now have these conversations. A conference like YTH collecting this group of people never could have occurred 30 years ago, or maybe could have occurred, but would have been maybe a lot smaller, because having access to the internet really lets us bring these viewpoints that we have and find others out there that have the same viewpoints and be in those conversations that maybe wouldn't have come up and definitely wouldn't have come up at this scale otherwise.
Well, I think with, go ahead.
Oh, in the same vein as what Max said, youth now have a lot of abilities and connections to empower their peers to make better decisions for themselves and for their communities.
And I think for some reason with our generation and kind of the younger generation, and maybe we're learning from the older generations, is that I know something like, I still hear people that are older than me say, like, really do take care of your mental health, because they notice later on how much that can stress you down. And I think it's important to have those conversations. Something that's relatable to me is that, I was born with HIV, so I was dealing with this for a long time and was physically healthy, but I wasn't really dealing with it and learning what it was. That by the time I lost both my parents, turning 18 years old, I totally had this like complete meltdown and went into depression and anxiety because I really hadn't gotten to the root of the problem. So you can't just always worry about physical health, it's mental health as well, and they have to go together. And I think that that's why we're all so passionate about it, is because you want to be happy, I think.
Yeah, certainly. So let's talk about what type of technologies or innovations have you or our youth peer group used to gather information about mental or sexual health? And for this question, I would like to highlight two of the panelists who have been working on new projects to do with that. So let's start with Vienna.
So with YTH, we've been working on this project called Viz Clinic, which will be like a virtual reality clinic to stop the initial anxiety that teens and young adults have when they go visit a clinic, because all they experience are like secondhand experiences from people who have been, but they don't know what that's like. So I think virtual reality is a really, really cool thing that is becoming super affordable for people. You just buy like a Google Cardboard and it's super easy to make, super easy to use, especially if you already have a smartphone. And so we've been doing a lot with virtual reality, and I think that's a big step.
Another technology that I think is very powerful is film, as we've seen today. About 2 years ago, I wrote a short story called Veracity. And it's a short film about a girl in high school who was outed as lesbian, and feedback that I've gotten from that has been very powerful from young people who say that they can relate. And I think that the film talks a lot about consent and different things like that. And I think some mainstream films can show different aspects of sexual identity, maybe in a negative light, but I think when it's told by young people, it's very powerful. So I would say film.
And I think we have a short clip from your film to show.
Oh, that's me. That was at Innovation Next with IDEO, and we had to prototype. If anyone was here this morning, we did prototypes, and that was our prototype of VR. So that's, yeah. You can see, yeah.
So here's a clip from Veracity.
Hi, I'm Olivia.
My name is Seif Man, and I am directing the short film Veracity for Scenarios USA. Making films based on the curriculum that the students had been through was appealing, and it felt like a good opportunity for me to give back. What Olivia went through was translated to the page well in a way that made me empathize with her and understand how painful that might be for someone.
I was definitely hesitant to kind of tell my stories about my family members, people I'm around in the Black community don't necessarily ally with the LGBT community, and I feel like if I said something, then I would be looked at as like, what do you mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, are you gay or something like that? Like, I don't think it was necessarily seen as like, oh, I could befriend somebody that's gay. My dad called me after talking with the producer and stuff, and he was like, so are you trying to tell me something? And I was like, no, I'm not, but if I was, like, I'd be respectful. Actually reminded me of why I wrote the story in the first place.
So those are two really cool examples of a way to use technology to discuss and gather info about these issues. Does anyone else have any experiences?
I'll say in Nashville, education health education isn't super accessible, and something that's been really cool and kind of low tech is the zines and street journals, which have been used for literally hundreds of years, but are super accessible, right, for folks that don't have internet or may not have cell phones, but are reproducible, and you can put them in clinics, you can put them in community centers, and that's been really helpful for me and the young people that I work with in Nashville for specifically sex ed and other HIV, STI prevention.
Well, I, in 2014, disclosed to pretty much everybody that I was HIV positive, so I went from about 5 people knowing to the whole world, and that was actually a really, really huge wake-up call, because you do think that there's just bad people out there and just stigma, but it was crazy the people that could relate or wanted to talk more, and it's been a really great learning process for me in using those technologies to reach out to young people, because they're not always wanting to come to the actual event until they're talking to you online, and yeah.
Okay. And are these the way? Is technology the best way to approach these critical issues? Are there other approaches that we could use? Does anyone have anything to say about that?
I think technology puts us in a really cool place, like we've been talking about throughout the day, and like we'll continue talking about throughout the rest of the conference, is that we're able to approach youth and young adults at a place we never have been able to, whether that's through Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Vine, anything like that. It's not like you have to go through the school system or go through the family anymore, go through the church. You can reach young adults exactly where they are and where they feel most comfortable being. So it gives us a whole other medium to communicate with them, and it's really important that we as educators or folks coming from an area where we kind of know where we're going with this and know what we're talking about, make sure that those messages are positive and inclusive. But it's really cool to be able to be working with young people where they want us to be working with them and where they want to be talking with us at.
I'm also going to say, that in conjunction with the traditional, having a seat at the table, and I really have to emphasize this because civic engagement is so important. There are organizations that are making decisions that impact young people every single day, but if young people aren't at the table, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and I really believe in that. So, just as an example, I'm actually the youngest board director on the Planned Parenthood board, and, being the youngest, but also the only person who's of Middle Eastern or Muslim descent has meant so much, because these women, and it's not that because they're malintentioned, but they just don't understand my experience, and they don't know what it's like to be a 23-year-old, in 2016, and the kind of attacks that I face just for being a woman and a woman of color on a daily basis, And so to be there and to be able to kind of contribute and just to have that voice represented means so much when they're making decisions for an entire global organization. And so for us to be here today, and I'm so privileged to be on this board, to be here today to speak our concerns and our voices, having a seat at the table, all of you are taking what we're saying back to your communities and back to your organizations, whereas you might have never had our input had we not, had this board not existed, and for us not to have this opportunity to speak. So yeah, having a seat at the table is really important. Woo.
So big shout out to YTH for having the Youth Advisory Board. Thanks so much. We're really, really happy to be here. And yeah, yay YTH for doing the right thing.
I just wanted to also mention too, just thinking about kind of creative ways in which folks from different communities can also channel some of this kind of negativity that society imposes on marginalized communities, right? So I think a lot about, particularly a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago, there was a Black Lives Matter conference that Loyola University Chicago hosted, and the Illinois Caucus Federalists in Health did a presentation, and they really focused, they kind of really merged this idea of sexual reproductive health education led by young people and combined it with creative ways in expressing that education and expressing them through the arts. And so Tiffany's she's the executive director right there of ICA. And so, yeah, it was just a really amazing presentation that was all youth-led. There was a ton of young people there from ICA, and I heard nothing but positive feedback from that presentation, from that conference. And so just thinking about also creative ways in which young people can just channel it, whether it's through technology, but also through writing, whether it's through film, whether it's just, or something that they just keep personal to themselves, but just as advocates, right, creating that avenue, creating that extension for young people to explore some of these identities, some of these experiences that they're having in their lives.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Before we open it up,
before we open the avenue and ask for audience questions, does anyone else have anything that they'd like to speak about in terms of advocate? Yeah.
I would just like to talk about a little bit reimagining our education system. So there are hundreds and thousands of issues with our American education system, first off. But I think what could be super helpful to meeting the huge disparities that lots of our youth face is looking at our community, our schools, and moving more towards community schools that actually meet the needs, right? So community schools that have health clinics within the school. Because we have compulsory education here in the United States, for the most part, most young people are going to a school every day, and so when we're able to meet those needs, they're able to be more present in school, right? But we're also able to meet the health needs in a very accessible way to them, and that includes creating more trauma-informed pedagogy, that includes building into your curriculum social and emotional learning, and holistic wellness, and really looking holistically at our schools and how they're meeting all the needs, right? Because our young people cannot learn in classrooms if they're hungry. They cannot learn if they haven't slept last night. They cannot learn if they don't have clean clothes to wear, right? So putting washing machines in a school is a super easy thing to do and will make it more accessible, right? And help meet the hygienic needs that a lot of our young people have and are not being met. And because education is such a huge phenomenon, and it's in every community for the most part, it can help us reach almost every young person in America, right? So really looking at how we could transform our schools into community cultural centers that help meet the needs of every young person.
Great, thank you. So I do think there are some questions that the audience we have time for maybe 4 or 5. If someone out there has a mic, we can begin. We have one over here first, I guess. Hi.
Can you hear me? Oh, there you can. Hey. First off, thank you all for being here. You all are brilliant, and you said some really amazing things. As someone that has transitioned to the other side of 25 a couple years ago, my question for you all is, what are some of the challenges that you have with adult allies, and what are some ways that you as young people have addressed some of those challenges with adult allies?
I think that's a great question.
I think it's important, like we were talking about before, to make sure that young adults have a seat at the table. Obviously, YTH has done an awesome job of making sure that young adults are involved throughout the entire conference planning process and throughout really every program that YTH does. So really going, if you're in America, you have young people around you. If you work on really anything within this community, there's young people that are going to be involved in that. And there's a lot of really passionate young people out there, even if you may have not met them yet, or you may have not engaged with them in your community. A couple of years ago, actually it's 6 or 7 years ago now, we started, when I was at Planned Parenthood, we started one of the first youth advisory boards there. And it was one of the projects people were like, well, I don't know if it's going to work. We have a national organization. Can we find 30 highly engaged youth that want to spend their weekends talking about sexual and reproductive health? And it worked really well. Once people learned about it, once they saw this opportunity, they were super interested in getting involved. So then giving youth those opportunities and making sure you have space on, whether it's your board or making sure you have space in your planning commission or whatever committee structure your organization uses to be dealing with these issues, make sure that you've got space for youth, to make sure that the youth are aware that they're invited and encourage them to be involved.
I would say too, not being afraid to challenge an adult who maybe struggling or may not necessarily, that a young person may not necessarily see as being an ally to them, if that makes sense. I think of my parents kind of, because they're from a totally different generation than I am. So I think it always can be scary to challenge your parents or even somebody who's just older than you, but it can be done in a respectful way to help, I think, older people kind of understand where young people are coming from.
So for challenges I faced, physically I look so much younger than I am, and on top of that, I've had people, in a board meeting or something, grab my cheeks in the middle of the meeting and say, wow, you're so cute, so really infantilizing me and babying me. And like, I can't help it, like I have chubby cheeks, you know, like I can't do anything about it. But I think that there is something to say about thinking that age has somehow become a standard for experience or for like how much you belong there. But I don't know when, you know, that became that standard for, you know, that's, you know, you belong at the table because of that. And, you know, people have told me before, wait your turn, like it's okay, you have time. And it's like, yeah, I know I have time, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to do things now. That doesn't mean that I don't want to work on this now. And I also feel that, you know, I have just as much right, and maybe even more so, than people who are doing it, you know, who are 10, 15, 20 years older than me. Since when did age become a limiting factor? Because I'm 23, I don't belong to, like, at the table making decisions along someone who's 50, when I'm probably impacted by those decisions, like, tenfold more than them, you know? So I do think that we need to change this culture of this, like, age becoming a standard for when, you know, like, I mean, we have that rooted in our political system, like, you can run for president if you're this age and older, and, you know, in Senate, and so, like, we have this culture in America that, you know, you have to be a certain age, like, once you're a certain age, like, you've had your experience and, you know, you're ready to be at the table, but, like, I'm sure that most of the people, as we know, in Congress who are of a certain age are not ready to be at the table and don't belong at the table.
So I experience a lot of problematic adult allies in the nonprofit industrial complex that I work in. It's fine. And I'm honestly really sick of this idea of, like, speaking for the voiceless, right? Because they're not voiceless. You need to rip the tape from their mouths and amplify the voices, right? Amplify their voices. They have voices, they have ideas, and we really need to deconstruct this idea of, like, the savior complex, where I find that I am working in youth-serving organizations that are trying to save our young people, and they don't need to be saved, right? They just need to be bolstered and supported and loved on. And that's where we really need to move in and move from, like, working in charity for young people to being in solidarity with young people and letting them lead the charge.